Direction. Jumping,
Hmm.
jumping in maybe to the first segment, understanding a little bit about what role this whole concept of culture, right, and organization building plays in a technology function. I think one, if
Hmm.
you could give me a little bit of a sense of how relevant is it, how important it is, how do you think about the role of culture in your engineering org, and second,
Hmm.
how does this vary as a company scale, right? At Flipkart, you were a team of 4 people. At Udaan,
Hmm.
I imagine it was a team of dozens of people, if not more. Probably something of
Hmm.
similar scale here at Supermoney. And then, of
Hmm.
course, you worked in the large American companies as well, which would have had hundreds
Hmm.
of people in their global organizations, just
Hmm.
in technology alone. So,
Hmm.
if you could give me a little bit of a sense, why is culture important? What role does it play, and how does it change
Sure.
as teams
Sure.
become smaller, larger,
Sure.
etc.?
Sure. Sure. I think. Hmm. I think. See, when it comes to culture, I don't necessarily demarcate between, let's say, an engineering and maybe an operations and maybe a business team. Right. I think that, and of course, there are stages of organizations, right?
Of course.
You will end up having an early stage company where a lot of the culture is a function of people setting the direction.
Mhm, mhm, mhm.
It's them who are setting a lot of where the organization needs to go and how they need to go there. As organizations become larger, by then you already have a lot of the culture being reinstated and it being a lot more rigid, so to speak, and harder to sort of evolve. Like, for example, if you were to think of an organization I don't know, not taking names. Let's say one of these organizations that went bust, right? A phone company that went bust because iPhone came and ate its lunch, right?
Right, right.
They found it very very hard to change who they were because a lot of things do get set in stone, right? So navigating or sort of turning that around can be very hard, right? That said, I think to answer your first question, I think I think culture is a bit of a continuum in the sense
Mhm,
that
mhm.
there is something base that uh, people who are giving directions at least initially set in a startup, and then there are going to be nuances that might be there in each of the functions, right? um, but more importantly, in my mind, it's not so much about what is written on the walls
Mhm,
or
mhm.
what gets shared over emails or what gets talked about in meeting rooms, but it's really what you're doing every day in your organization that defines your culture, right? And I think that it is important to recognize that, and sometimes that introspection can be hard because you are sort of getting signals and you're getting noise, right? How do you sort of then determine that maybe this is what I said my culture was, and this is where I am, and
Mhm,
this
mhm.
is where the deviation might be, and it could be a smallish deviation or a largest, or a very large deviation, right? uh, Usually if it's a very large deviation, it's very hard to land, but if it's a smallish deviation, maybe there could be some amount of correction either in terms of what you state you want to be or you change the things that you're doing. It could be one of them, right?
Right.
um, that said, as a startup specifically, as it sort of keeps evolving, um, certain things that you thought worked for you in terms of what you exhibited as a culture may or may not hold true, and hence it is important to also evolve, right?
Right,
So
right.
So what you did, let's say for example, you followed the dictum of move fast and break things, and that worked. But then over time, you ended up becoming a successful organization, and if you broke things, a lot of people got pissed off with you,
Hmm.
right?
Hmm.
So
Hmm.
then you have to change a little bit of what you are doing, right? Um, and especially in technology, I think as technologists, we love to solve problems. We love to validate some of our hypotheses that can be there at the back of our head. Just put it out there and see if it works or not. But then I think it is important for an engineering organization to be very very aware of uh, the trade-offs, right? Some of the best engineers that I have worked with have a very clear view in terms of specifically calling out um, some of the trade-offs that they are taking and saying, "Hey, look, I'm taking this debt now. I'm just making you aware that this is a debt which can come back and sort of cause problems later on. So we
Mhm,
best
mhm, mhm.
sort of get rid of it at some point in time. That is not bad. I don't. When it sort of has gathered a bit of a negative connotation, I don't necessarily think that debt is bad, right? But as long as you are conscious about it,
Right.
as long as you're thinking first principles, I think it's good, right? So yeah, I mean, again, going back to your question, an organization can have a culture where they say they take pride in their velocity.
Right.
Okay.
Right.
Now that's an overall view. Now that is a continuum that can end up flowing into technology as well.
Hmm.
That
Hmm. Hmm.
technology org also takes pride in its velocity.
Right. You
Okay.
ship fast, you build products fast, and so on
Correct.
and so forth.
Correct. However, as a technologist, you are over time you're also aware about the fact that if you don't do things properly, it will
Right.
come back and really bite you. Right. So naturally, engineers would want to be risk averse. They would want to be risk averse, right? So naturally, there is that friction that will come into play when you're sort of part of an engineering org, because and especially when it comes to software engineering, it's fraught with uncertainties. If
Right.
somebody says I have been able to estimate things 100% accurately, that man has my lady has my respect, right? I've really come across such person. But if you're there and we're interviewing, by the way. But anyways, I think so there is that bit of risk awareness, but again, that organization needs to have a slant towards velocity. But a good organization not only has that slant, but they also end up building the right checks and balances such that they are not releasing things that are not high quality, right?
I
So
understand.
so when somebody asks me for, let's say, hey, velocity versus quality, I say both, right? It cannot be one or the other, right? So 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 at a startup, maybe that is what it is. But maybe at a larger company where there's way too much at stake, if things break, maybe the culture then shifts to being safe, be safe first, right?
I understand.
And that safe is not just quality, it could be security, it could be, compliance, whatever, right? And so different stages of organizations, but I would imagine the core tenet of a culture to be a continuum, and then nuances can exist
Sure.
in different functions.
Sure, sure.
Right?
No, I think that's super helpful. One of the things that also just came to my mind is when we also keep seeing different, companies take different approaches as startups, especially at the early
Uh,
stage, which is where I'm working now.
uh,
There is often this difference in perspective that when it comes to velocity, right? Like both teams want to build something high quality, but there is a difference in perspective in terms of velocity, which comes not from being able to say doing more in less time, but in terms of what is
hmm,
it that you choose to do first, right? Like the
hmm,
MVP for the product, does it have one or two of the top functionalities that you promised your customer? Or is it a full stack
hmm,
platform that has everything in it on day one, right? which can then be the difference between going live and shipping the first POC in weeks versus months, right? I think that becomes like one choice that I've seen founders consciously make. Of course, in certain spaces, say if you're building in healthcare, you're building in financial services, you maybe can't take that first path, right? Maybe it has to always be a fully digested product because there are regulatory requirements around compliance, safety,
Yeah.
money laundering, privacy, whatever it may be, right?
Yeah.
To ensure that these things happen. But I was just reflecting on that as you were talking about the velocity and the quality aspect.
Yeah.
This is also
Yeah.
another way in which seen people go about
So,
it. Quite
so
interesting.
one of the things, so Rohit, one of the things is especially if you, yeah. So the domain brings in another angle, right?
Right.
But it, I think what is useful, like even in the context of fintech, right? Being compliant, following the laws of the land are non-negotiable, right? When talking in the context of super money, right? I think somehow you inherit the domain, and by that what I
Right.
mean is, by design, you are not consciously thinking about it all the time. Meaning, you if you divert from, let's say, the guardrails that have been built for you will not be able to ship, right?
Right. Right.
Now,
Right.
now you create those guardrails, and then you try to figure out the right kind of velocity, cross quality, etc., such that there is predictability as far as your organization is
Of
concerned,
course. Of course.
and homogeneity in behavior, right?
I think that makes a lot of sense. That constraints in some way, also influence how the culture
Yeah,
of the organization can operate, because the culture
yeah,
is to allow you to navigate those constraints while still being
correct,
effective. I think
correct.
that's super
And
important.
and as a startup, you still push the bar, right? You
Of
still
course.
want to understand, you push the envelope and see how much more, right? But the fabric has to be solid in the sense
Yes,
that it can't be a loose fabric that a little push and it sort of gives in, right? So
I
I
understand.
think it's important to